So what is this? What is self? How can we start to understand what this one substance is that we're calling self? Self is unborn. Self ever existed, and therefore self will never die. It's unborn, therefore it's eternal. And that's why it's ever existed. When you say ever existed, it means the absence of time. It's not an infinitely long timeline where you're on that infinitely long timeline somewhere as a moment in time on that line. There is no timeline. There is no time. Everything is just now. There's only here and now. And therefore you will never die because you were never born. There's no starting point to self. There's no middle point to self. And there's no end point to self. Because it never came into existence. It's ever existed. Therefore, it can't distance itself from itself. Anytime it tries to separate itself from itself, it only steps into more of itself, and the void that it tried to create only generates more of itself. There's no outside of it. It can't step outside of itself to separate itself, to look back onto itself and go, there I am. Because every time it tries to step outside of itself, it only finds more of itself. And there's no inside of self. Therefore, it can't be fractionalized. It can't be marginalized. It can't be compartmentalized. There's only the one substance of self, of yourself. In reality, self isn't even one. It's one. It's oneness. It's the presence of one. For there to be one, it has to be contrasted against something else to say, I am one relative to whatever the contrast is. For me to have one fist, it has to be one fist relative to one palm. And now you have two. You have a fist and you have a palm. You have duality. And what's being pointed to here is non-duality. Also in reality, the self, yourself, doesn't even exist. It's just existence itself. The term exist is a Latin term from the word ex estere. Ex meaning out of, and estere mean to stand apart from. Self cannot come out of anything. It can't come out of itself to stand apart from itself, to say, I exist. Relative to something else. So it cannot take its own independent stand relative to what? It would have to come out of non-self to stand apart for self, to stand apart from anything else. It would have to come out of non-self to be self, to look back onto non-self, to stand apart from non-self and exist independently of it and say, I exist independently of this over here. And that would be duality. Said slightly different, self exists. So for it to stand apart from and exist independently of itself, it would have to come out of non-existence into existence to stand apart from non-existence. And now you have two. Now you have duality. And what we're pointing to here is non-duality. You just are. It just is. This may sound nihilistic, and it is to an ego. Egos don't dig this. Too harsh. But to yourself, it's a warm homecoming. Because remember Sat Chit Ananda. When you know the one existence of yourself, you experience bliss. You experience ever-present happiness, permanent peace. So what this is saying is this, it's describing a perfect model of non-separation. It's demonstrating that the word separation is just a conflict. It doesn't exist. It can't exist in the non-dual model. And to be even more direct, that means that any suffering, because suffering is when you believe you're separate from yourself, suffering arises out of that. That means that suffering itself is an illusion. Separation's an illusion generated by the ego, and therefore the apparent suffering, because we believe we're separate, also is an illusion. And as you know your one self, you lose the ability to understand what separation means, and therefore you lose the ability to suffer. So how does this all work? What's going on here? Okay, there's one thing. It's actually quite simple. You have totality, the one substance, the infinite substance. This is just the infinite collapsed down into itself into a form. So you have the infinite formless collapsing down into a finite form of itself, while it's never separate or anything other than itself. So what this is, another way to say it, is this is consciousness collapsed down in an activity of itself. So you could say, if this is self, if this is the infinite self, all it is that what we see is just itself collapsed down into an activity of itself. Okay? We're just seeing the infinite consciousness, ourself, in a finite form. It never separates itself from itself. It can't, because even the separation is itself. Right? I mean, that means there's no separation. This is consciousness's activity. And the infinite cannot know or see the finite directly, and vice versa. The finite can't see and know the infinite directly. So as it collapses itself down, we are one of the apparent objects that it collapses itself down into. And then through our senses, we're like a prism, so to speak, where the infinite sees the finite of itself through the prism of our senses. So this is nothing but ourself appearing as itself to witness itself. This is you projecting this to perceive your own glory. Take that in for a moment. I did tell you at the beginning, it would be unbelievable. But as you'll see, the more you're willing to understand what's being pointed to here, and the more you're willing to go within and see if this is actually true, the more and more you will understand that this is the real model of reality. And the more and more at peace you'll be with yourself. So, what is this ego? What clouds? What dims our light? What makes us believe that we are separate? That this is a harsh reality of objects, of physical objects, of the matter first model? What is it? Well, what happens around the age of 4 to 6 is that, well, up to that point, we are pure being. Children, babies, children, infants, they are pure being, pure knowing being bliss. That's why when you look at them, they're just like, wow. And between 4 and 6, we start to hear our parents and our teacher, well, primarily our parents at that age, But as we age, it's teachers and clergy and coaches and, But we start to hear him say, you're somebody. You're a boy. You're American. You're Hispanic or white. And as we age, oh, you're fast. Oh, you're not that good at reading. We start to build this structure of egoic self, separate self. And the moment we buy into our parents' belief system that we are somebody who we're not, is the moment we start to suffer. Because we've completely pulled our attention away, or we're starting to pull our attention away. We pull our attention away from ourselves. And the moment we pull our attention away from ourselves, we start to feel separation and we start to suffer. And the suffering at these early ages could just be the dimming of the light of the glory of the divine from within, the glory of self. The light that we were once beaming is slightly dampened now, because now I'm a boy or a girl, which diminishes the pure being that I once was. And as you see, as you add all of these concepts and these thoughts and these images of ourselves, and we build this up over time, the more we add, the farther we get away. And then we really buy into the concept, hey, the more I get, the more I gain, the higher the ladder I climb. The more I'm wealth, the more trips I take, the more epic adventures I do, the deeper snow I ski, I will be happier. And that is futile. That is saying that happiness is found out here. It's anywhere but here. It's out here and I've got to go find it. And the ego does. And that's its job. Its job is to go find this happiness. You could also say its job is to keep you as far away from yourself as you can stay. Because the ego knows, and here's a paradox. There's several paradoxes in this message that you'll encounter, but here's probably the main one, is that the ego does not want you to know yourself, yet simultaneously it longs to return to its source of self. Since everything arises out of self, even ego has to rise out of itself. But ego is just a cluster of thoughts, images, and ideas. It doesn't have any substance to it. That's why nobody's found one. So as we move through life, we think we're doing the right thing. We think we're gaining, becoming, working towards this thing called retirement. And sometimes that path works for people. Like, life appears to just play out just fine enough for that image of nailing life, retiring, and dying peacefully and wealthy. But for many, it doesn't work that well. We get to a point to where our suffering is so bad that we say, what's going on here? And some of us, this would include me recently, is that you just surrender because the suffering was too bad. Some, which may include some of you, haven't quite gotten to that point yet, but you're hearing this message prior to you getting there. And some of you that aren't too far away from yourself might say, I don't need this model yet. But there might be someday down the road where just shit goes sideways, man. And you can't figure it out. And you go down into a spiral. And you're like, you know what? I heard this non-duality presentation 10 years ago. Maybe that's the answer. But just like the letter said, you have brought yourself here today. Yourself brought itself here. So how do we eliminate this ego? If this is the darkening, if this arose, if this was built over apparent time, how do we disassemble it? You should be able to. You built it. Why can't you disassemble? You could build a house. You could disassemble the house. Well, that's again where the Eastern philosophy comes in. Advaita Vedanta has you could say a practice known as self-inquiry. Self-inquiry is the actionless act of turning within to turn your attention and to abide in yourself relentlessly. You turn away from the world. You turn away from what we know will not generate our happiness. We turn it towards that which does, which is happiness, which is ourself. This is prior to mind. Remember, everything arises out of self. Your mind rises out of self. Your body rises out of self. That your perceptions rise out of self. And all of this materialism that you see arises out of the source of self. So the more you turn in and the more you hang out in yourself as yourself, in self-inquiry or self-investigation, you inquire into your source of being and you rest in being, what happens is that miraculously, and I say that because you'll start to see things happen that you didn't do because you're resting in a place prior to ego. And the more you understand this place, it collapses the ego and the self rises. So right now, we're sitting here in this room and we believe we're separate objects in this room. And only if I bring it to your attention, are you conscious, are you aware? You'd be like, yeah, of course, I'm here. In this Western hemisphere, conscious is like, it's a second-hand, it's a fourth-class citizen. It's back here somewhere. Your awareness, yeah, you're always aware, but you know, unless somebody points it out to you to bring it up front, and you go, oh yeah, I'm aware. And the moment you move on and awareness drops back here, and self is out here. Self's out here, and I'm sorry, ego's out here and self is back here. The more you rest into your own being, the ego diminishes and the qualities of self come into play. The qualities of knowing your own existence as yourself is happiness. And before you know it, for one, you'll taste it. You're like, oh my gosh, this is actually real. And the moment you taste it, you will most likely not stop until you've realized it more and more and more, that self is the ever-present happiness that you have been seeking your whole life. And it will become a permanent presence in life. The ego will be diminished, which means suffering goes along with it, which means peace and happiness and joy and love arise as the once dual perspective of the matter first model disintegrates and the unity model, the non-duality model, rises to the forefront. You could also say the world drops away as the ego rises. Because the world is only here, it's always here. Nothing is ever being denied. Okay? This always remains. It's just when the ego drops away, the illusion of separation drops away. The illusion of an objective world out there drops away, and all that is known is yourself, and therefore everything that's perceived is also yourself. What you are, perception is. Let me give you a metaphor. Gold rings, gold earrings, gold necklaces, gold bars, gold coins, gold brooches. What is their underlying reality? It's gold. So here you have gold, the underlying reality of all of these objects. Stated differently, all of these objects have one underlying substance known as gold. That is what's happening here. This is gold appearing as rings and coins and necklaces. This is yourself. This is self appearing as bodies, tables, and chairs and galaxies. So why is this important? It's important because as separation drops away and unity arises, all you know is others as yourself and yourself as others. There are no others. There's only the one self, and this one self is unconditional love. It's known in Advaita as love without otherness. That you lose the ability to not love unconditionally. Before you even meet people, you will know that you love them. Because you love yourself as them. Knowing yourself is the greatest gift you can render yourself and the world. Because when the ego goes to zero, there's nothing left to obstruct your light. You unconditionally and inadvertently shine. And it's effortless. You are being the best human being that you can by just being yourself and knowing yourself.